Welcome to our podcast, Michelle and Stacey, all things small business.
We hope you enjoy this episode and please visit our website, michelleandstacey.com.au.
That's MICHELLEANDSTACEY.com.au. We would love to hear from you.
Welcome to episode 12 with Michelle and Stacey talking all things small business. Today's episode is on selling. When you're selling your business, we're going to talk about some of the risks associated with that.
So we're going to talk about what are some of the risks that you may encounter, when those risks may occur, and the types of risks that would occur. So the types of risks that we're going to talk about are going to be like the deal strategy stage, the financials, the legal, the operational, and the competition, and also reputation. So you might say, okay, well, what does that really mean? So I think for the deal and the strategy, that's really about, probably the majority of them are going to affect that, right? The risk, right? So in some kind of way. So that's the whole process, the whole deal. The financial risk is, you're selling it for a set amount of dollars, right? So the risk is that you're not going to get what you want, or you might fall short, and therefore you might have to pay something back. The operational risk is really about if you are running your business at the same time as you're trying to sell, and you're kind of looking at stuff and, you let things lapse, the operation of your business might be impacted from that sale.
And that can then affect the value.
That's right. That's right.
Or the deal completely.
Totally. And then say the reputation as well. So, because let's face it, not all deals go through. So, you want to make sure that there's no risk to your reputation, because any deal can fall over at the last moment. So you don't want that to happen. Legal risks, obviously you don't want to get sued. So you want to make sure that's real watertight. And the final one is the competition. So, your competition may get wind of this. They may come in and take some market share away from you, may take your employees at that time. So you're just going to be very careful about that. So, okay, Stace, let's go. So
let's go.
First one.
Yeah. So we've just got a whole bunch of examples that we'll run through, which are things that we've just seen in our experience working with lots of small business clients. So our first one we'll kick off with is value risk. So this is where you've obviously identified, as you would have heard in some of our earlier episodes, identified where the value in your business really sits.
Yeah. And what do you mean by that? Like, we've covered this previously, hopefully you've listened to them, but really the value could be brand value, it could be the processes, it could be
your location, it could
be lots of different things.
Whole heap of different things. So as an example right here, we'll use process as an example.
Yeah.
So if the value in your business sits within your process, so maybe you've got this really slick, efficient process, and that's why this potential purchaser is wanting to buy your business, because they're going to integrate that maybe into their
they could be a competitor, and they want that process to help their business. So they're going to grow their business, but they're going to actually use what you've got to really make it their business better. Yeah,
definitely. So what you want to make sure in this case to really mitigate this risk, to safeguard against it, is to make sure that you've got it really well documented. If your employees are transferring across to this purchaser, so the new business owner, that they're fully across how that process works. Just to make sure that value actually ends up being transferred.
Yes.
Because if that doesn't happen, the purchaser's not going to be happy, right? Because they're paying you for something and then they're not getting what they're expecting to get. So it's really important that you safeguard against that in any way you can to make sure that value transfers across.
Yeah,
so everyone's happy.
Yeah, and I think if it doesn't, like if you lose it, obviously there's a financial risk and a legal risk, because one, they may sue you saying, well, I bought this for that and it hasn't worked. And then obviously if they're going to sue you, they want some money, so you could lose money. So they're the two main risks, and and they're pretty important. So
very important. So where the time and when that becomes a real risk to you really is after the deal's been done.
Yeah.
Because that's when it's on you to make sure that you deliver your share of the bargain.
Yeah. The next one I'd say would be employees. So this type of risk is one, this is really, I guess, before the sale goes through and after, depending on what happens with the employees. So obviously before the sale, there'll be a particular time when you're going to tell your employees that it's happening. And, you want to make sure that they're comfortable about it. You don't want them, you want to make sure that if they whiff that there's something in like a sale in the air, that they're going to go and leave you. So, and if they're particularly a key employee, that could really impact the sale as well. So you want to make sure that that employee's happy. You might give them a bonus. There's lots of different things you can do with that to mitigate that risk. But you want to make sure that they're happy. And then also if they're transitioning to the new business, you want to make sure that they're happy as well going to the new owner, that the conditions are the same and they're going to get treated well and all that kind of stuff, as much as you possibly can. Obviously, you can't do everything, but, that's what you do.
Yeah. So it's definitely one that you really need to consider.
Yeah.
The next one I would think about would be due diligence. So when you're so the due diligence we've spoken about previously, so it's like, you're lifting the hood and you're having a look underneath.
And this happens when you've pretty much agreed on everything. You've talked about the price. Everyone's pretty happy, right? And you've given them quite a bit of information. Now it's coming to the nitty-gritty. There's a contract in place, and the contract would be usually subject to due diligence. And due diligence means what you've told the potential purchaser is what they're getting. So then they have the opportunity to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. So in case you haven't listened to our due diligence, that's what due diligence is, yeah?
Great summary there, Michelle. So when this comes in, like when this is actually a risk, is both before the deal's been finalised and after the deal's been finalised, because as Michelle said, that due diligence process happens before, everyone signs officially on the dotted line and pays money, basically, for the deal to happen. That's the before part of it. But then there's the after part of it with, hang on, or this has come up and we weren't expecting this.
Or we weren't told about this, yeah? So...
And that's where, like, you can have a legal ramification. It could have, like, an operational or financial, or the whole deal could fall over. Like, they could try and renege on the whole deal depending on the clauses and things you've got in your contract. So they might be suing you for money, like, well, all right, well, I'm not paying as much as I originally was going to pay you for it. So you may need to give money back. This can also affect if your competitors get wind of, that sale's happened and such and such is not happy, and they could come in and then try to, as we're talking about before, employees go, this business might fall over here. I might try and grab those employees, or hey, I'll buy the business out from underneath you for a cheaper price, or so it can go very pear-shaped very quickly.
Yeah. So the way to mitigate that would be that you really need a good plan and you need to stick to it, and you need to be open and honest, right? You can't. This is bearing everything. So if there's flaws, if there's some issues in the business, the purchaser needs to know about them, right? They don't want to find out about them after they've, paid for it and, they're 6 months down the track and then there's some major issue with something, that could have, as Stacey was just saying, the ramifications could be bad, that, then they might come back and sue you because it's not what they expected.
Exactly. And so where, like you mentioned, Michelle, there might be some issues in the business. If you are to mention those, this is why all that planning and preparation is important, because when you are mentioning them, obviously people don't like to hear about problems. They like to hear about problems with solutions. So if you're prepared and planned, you can mention the problem, but you can also mention the solution. And this is how we're working with that situation. So that way it gives the purchaser comfort that, okay, this is great. They've been open and honest with me and told me about this, but they've also given me some comfort in this is the approach to take to work with that problem moving forward. So then it shouldn't really affect the price, for example, too much. And also,
if you've bared all, they know what they're buying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess what's another example?
Well, could be if contracts are really important, like if you've got, say, distribution contracts with someone, and they could be either, in Australia or they could be overseas. You want to make sure that those contracts are pretty watertight. The issue could be if it's overseas. Someone, you're not going to go and sue someone who's overseas. It's just not, feasible. So you want to make sure in that case, well, any case, is that the relationship between the two new parties, the purchaser and the person with the contract, is pretty. It's good. They understand each other. They understand what's in the contract. So there's nothing new that comes out once the sale goes through, and there's no ability for the person who's got the contract to just come back and go, oh, I don't want to do it anymore, and it's void because you haven't done this or that. You make sure that they understand all the, I guess, technicalities within the contract as well.
Definitely. And I guess also those contracts, they're not necessarily just what's on paper. There's often relationships that sit behind those contracts. And so it's probably also really important that the relationships are also transferred.
Well, yeah, it's not just the relationship. That's a good point, because it could be that, yes, not everything's on paper, but it could be that this is the way we do it and this is our process. It's not written down, which might be unusual for some reason, but that's the way they do it. So if the new purchase comes in and wants to do it a different way, and the person, that's supplying goes, no, we don't do it like that. This is the way it's done. Then, that could be potentially an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be really important that those relationships and those introductions to those key people that sit behind those contracts that are actually introduced to each other, and they've built rapport, and that takes time. That takes time, but that will be a really key part to safeguarding that the transfer of this business is successful.
Yeah. The next one I'd probably talk about is the actual legal contract of sale. And part of the legal contract of sale, I guess, will include any kind of warranties and indemnities. Yeah. So the importance of that is, to me, it's really important that you get a good lawyer who has a good, strong commercial background, and then they've got the practical, they understand a business, and they're not going to, make it too difficult to understand, but also they understand the tax implications, right? I can't stress that enough, because not all lawyers understand tax or take it into account. So, and it may be you might use the same firm, but they may refer to a tax partner and a commercial partner that to run over. So the commercial partner might put the contract together, but they, you want to make sure that it's gone over by a tax lawyer to understand the ramifications.
Absolutely. And if you want more information on that, we did a deep dive into that in a previous episode with Andrew Henshaw from Velocity Legal.
Yeah, who's really, really good.
Yeah, really good. So you may want to revisit that episode if that's something you want to do a bit more of a deep dive into.
Yeah, and you want to understand, if there's warranties and indemnities, what does it really mean? You want to make sure that if it's in the contract, you understand, so you know what potentially could come back to you. Don't just leave it to the lawyer to put in. Make sure they explain it to you and you understand it.
Absolutely. And if a lawyer says to you, oh, it's just a standard clause, that you
just say, oh, just play dumb. I don't care. I don't understand it. Yeah. No question is a dumb question. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the next one then would be taking your eye off the ball. So that's a potential risk that can happen. So sometimes these sale deals take a very long time to get through.
It could be 1 or 2 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes the deal may take, 6 months to 12 months to actually strike the deal and put, pen to paper. But then the transition of the business may take 2, 3, 5 years, down the track before you're fully out, depending on what your deal is, right?
Yeah.
So you never want to take your eye off the ball. And so this is probably before the deal goes through is where this is most important. Because the risk here is financial, right? That's one of the risks. Another one is operational. There's also your reputation, and there's also your competition could also step in here, right? So what can happen is you can be so busy negotiating this deal that the actual asset and the value that you've got right now, because you haven't actually sold it at this point, right? You're just still negotiating and giving information and all of this. You're spending all this time, energy, and effort on that, and you might forget a little bit about, actually, I'm still running a business over here. And if this deal doesn't go through for whatever reason, and you've taken your eye off the ball and you haven't been,
Well, you might lose sales, for example. So say if you were turning over 200,000 a month, say, in sales, and you've got some strong competitors, and they might be just going, beauty, they're just real slow. Let's just take. And you might go, oh, I've dropped down over a couple of months, just 100,000 a month, say, for example. So you've lost a couple of 100,000. Not to say you can't get it back, but that could impact your sale price. You could
Absolutely.
Say, they could go, hang on a minute, why are you losing sales here? You've lost it. So I'm going to discount the price that we're going to pay you. Yeah. So you've got to make sure that the business is still chugging along exactly as it should be while you're doing the sale process.
Absolutely. And so that's why, balancing your time and your energy is really important, because you want to be giving your best in all areas, but you have to balance that, right? So you don't want to be ideally trying to do this when you're burnt out.
But also, I think you need to be careful. You need to be able to have a good ability to read the room. And by that, I mean understanding, is the purchaser real? Like if a purchase comes up and they expect you to spend 80% of your time for 3 months with them, you got to go, one, is that really right? No. You've got to be able to read that room going, I don't think this is going to, there's warning bells going off here because that's way too much time. And if you get sucked in by it, you might go, oh, yeah, if it's the first time you've done a process like this, you might think, oh, I need to do that. No, you don't. You've got to be able to go, okay, no, this doesn't feel right. It's not right. Because you, as I said, they could do it for a reason to suck you in to do the, make sure the sales go down, and they know that it's going to come back, and they can do it, like lots of different things, right? So, yeah.
Especially if it's one of your competitors that's potentially looking to buy you, right? Because they may be actually taking those sales, for example, in the meantime. Yeah. So they're getting, their cake and eat it too in that situation. So
exactly. Yeah.
To be very careful. What's another one?
Well, everyone's got insurance for everything under the sun, right? So you want to make sure,
have at least.
Yeah. But you want to make sure that you've got insurance all the way through up until, the day of or the day after the sale, and you've got your money, right? So don't let your insurance lapse, because if something happens or it doesn't go through, could be an issue, could be a problem. Yeah.
Definitely. And also, depending on your industry, you may actually need to still hold insurance after the sale goes through.
Yes.
So there are some industries
like
where
one-offs and stuff.
Yeah. So it's really important that you look into that and get the right advice. So just do not let your insurance lapse until you get proper advice.
Yeah. And then talking about getting advice, you really want to make sure that you're clear on the tax implications of the sale, right? So before you really even start negotiating, you've got your contracts, you've got to have all that sorted. So you've got to have your accountant, your advisor be all across it and telling you this is what it's going to mean from a tax perspective. So you don't come along and think, oh, I'm going to get $1 million for my business, but actually I'm going to spend 500,000 on tax. So I'm actually only going to clear 500, thinking you're going to get the million. You need to understand, what are you really going to get out of it after tax?
Absolutely. And we covered that in detail in some previous episodes. We encourage you to revisit those, but also, speaking to the right people, your right advisors to get really clear advice on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably the final one I'd like to just touch on today is negotiation. So the risk here is that not everyone's a great negotiator, right? And when it comes to negotiating the business or the price and stuff, some people will just do it no problem, right? And if you're one of those people, great, go ahead. But I've had instances where people are so emotionally involved in the business and that's not their personality. And they're quite keen to sell, right, as well, because they may want to retire, whatever the reason.
We burnt out.
You don't want the purchaser to kind of whiff onto that and go, oh, beauty, well, I'll be able to screw the price down because they really want to sell. So in that instance, you might say, okay, I don't think you're the best person to negotiate this deal. Obviously they're involved, but then it may be your advisor, it may be someone else in the business, whoever that you trust that that you're going to get the best price, because otherwise you may give stuff away that you shouldn't have, and you'll kick yourself later if you do that.
Yeah. And I guess what are the ramifications, of that? Is like, there's financial, I guess, is one of them. You won't get the best price possible, as
Well,
you've
that's the
said.
main
Yeah.
one, really,
Yeah.
because and there's nothing you can do once the business sold. It's sold. It's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's happened.
And you might have done yourself out, $250,000 or something.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. I guess another one could be legal, because if you haven't put all the, clauses into the contract, as part of what you've negotiated, you may have given away too much as part of, without getting that proper legal advice. You might have agreed to things that, you've just been a little bit too generous,
Yes.
with your time, or, with giving away, oh yeah, I'll just throw that in for you, that extra, that extra piece of equipment or whatever. Just because as Michelle said, you're over it. You just want to get out. You just want this done. That may not be in your best interest.
And if you're going to stay on in the business and help the transition, I've got some clients that are saying, oh yeah, I'll just help, I'll help them for a year and stuff. I'm like, well, why? You should have a set period of time, part of, through that negotiation to say, okay, well then, I'll do 3 months as part of the sale. That's included in the sale. But if you need me after that, then it's going to cost you X, and get some money out of it. Because otherwise, if you just leave it kind of open-ended, they'll just keep coming and asking, and you wasting your time. And, before you know it, you might have lost $100,000 or $200,000 in your time. So,
yeah, absolutely. So I guess have a good plan and stick to it.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that's probably enough of a taste of risks, for today. So hopefully that's given you an idea. Really, for me, I think the best way to approach this is, once you've got, I guess, you feel that you've started or discussions with the purchaser and you think it's going to start to go through. So you wouldn't have started negotiations or anything like that, but you really think, no, I think this could really work. That's the time I'd actually sit down and just nut out, I'd put it on paper. Yeah. So then it becomes top of mind. You're not going to think of it every day, but you want to make sure that you've understood what are these risks for you. So then you have a little plan if it's, things start to go a bit pear-shaped. So you've thought about it. Yeah,
definitely. And there's no harm in running this past, your advisor, whether that's, a business coach, an accountant, a business advisor, you've got whoever it may be. It could even be a really good friend of yours that sold businesses in the past or runs their own business. You just need someone as a sounding board, to run these things past as well.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks for listening today. We really appreciate it. Next episode is going to be our last episode in this series of Selling Your Business. And this is going to be tips, tricks and traps. Bit of a tongue twister there.
Yes.
But really we're just going to go through, I guess it's really the traps. What are some of the traps you could get in? And then we're just going to give you a few little tips and tricks to try and help you with that. So thanks very much for listening once again, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We hope you found it informative and useful. We would like to clarify that this podcast is for educational purposes only. The conversations are of a general nature and do not qualify or constitute as financial or tax advice. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect any official stance. We make no guarantees about the accuracy, reliability, or completeness of the information presented and are not liable for any losses or damages arising from its use. We recommend you seek the advice of your own legal, financial, or other licensed professional before making any decisions based on the information provided in this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and tune in again soon to listen to further episodes.